There we go.
You'll have to send me your background, Diana, so I can use it.
Yeah, they're all available on the Laurel Ridge
Oh,
website. But yeah, I'll send you the link because they have a lot of different options.
okay.
Yep. All right, so 2 o'clock. I'm gonna admit everyone in three, two, one.
Welcome, Janet and Jeannie Ann. We'll get started in just a few minutes. We're going to give everybody just another minute or two to hop on. Okay, well, it is 2:02, so in respect for everyone's time, we're going to get started. Diana will let folks in as they join us. I do not need to do my opening spiel because you all know about Workforce Solutions. So with that, Jeannie Ann and Janet, these are free webinars that we do once a month. And we normally do them at 12 noon. But as you know, we had the employee celebration today, so we switched our time to 2 o'clock. So today's topic is emotional intelligence. I am so excited to participate in this one. We have one of our amazing instructors teaching this, Mr. John Tallheimer. He is an award-winning leadership coach. He's one of our amazing facilitators. He's a podcast host and a best-selling author. He's got 25 years experience in corporate training and leadership development. And John, we are just so thankful for you to do this today. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Christine. Thank you so much for having me here today. I am really excited. This is one of my favorite topics when I get to present it or talk about it or do workshops around it or teach it, because it's one of those things that is not only important at work, and it's really important at work, but it's also important in life as well. And so taking that opportunity, I'm glad you guys taken that hour to kind of learn more about this and understanding the impact it can have on our careers, the impact it can have on our lives, because it's a really kind of a great thing to do. And I love starting with this quote from Martin Luther King. In a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men and women are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And what he's saying there is that how we behave matters, right? It matters for us. It matters for our coworkers. It matters for our direct reports. It matters for our boss. And thinking about our behaviors and increasing our intentionality, which kind of emotional intelligence is really about. How do I be more intentional with the decisions I'm making is really critical to being more emotionally intelligent, being more aware, and making better decisions in that moment, and kind of going through that can be a really powerful thing. And so I want to start with this, and I don't need you to say anything out loud, put anything in the chat box, but I do want you to think internally what happens in the chaos of the day. How often do you find yourself pulled into distractions instead of saying focus on what matters? So just think about that for a second. When things get tense or busy, how often do you shift into solo mode instead of asking for help? When change hits, do you tend to resist and get frustrated? Or do you adjust and find a way forward? When you work with people who you don't naturally connect with, how much effort do you put into keeping the relationship strong? When emotions run high, yours or someone else's, how often do you pause and respond with intention rather than react automatically? And these questions really shape when I'm thinking about the impact emotional intelligence skill sets can have on an individual. These really go a long way. And so kind of thinking about that, when things get tense or busy, do we shift into solo mode? I'm going to say sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm like, I just need to get it done. Don't bother me. I just need to get it done. That's probably may not be the right decision in the moment in there. When your emotions run high, do you take that moment to pause and be intentional before you respond, or do you react? A lot of us will react, right? We get into that mode and we're just reacting in that mode. We're just kind of paying attention to it. And when we work on building our emotional intelligence, we can be better. We can get better results out of there. So I want to talk about the top career derailers. We'll get into that a little bit. What are they? How do they impact us? I'm going to share a story from where my career went the wrong way. I want to get into understanding emotions. What are they? How do they impact our behaviors? And then we'll get into the self side of emotional intelligence, and then the other side, right? The other side, managing other people side of emotional intelligence, and then really talking about trust and how do we build trust within our organization. So let's talk about what the top career derailers are. So the Center for Creative Leadership looked at what is the behaviors that will derail an individual's career. And these were the top ones they found. Number one, failure to meet business objectives, right? And so underlying all this, and a lot of times when we're talking about emotional intelligence, we're not talking about our business work, our ability to actually do the work, but it's important, right? In every job, if you are not meeting the business objectives, it's going to derail your career, which is kind of obvious, but it is an important thing to be thinking about. Okay, well, that's one of the things, but it's not the only thing that could derail your career. Number two, problems with leading a team. So if you are not emotionally aware, emotionally intelligent to deal with other members, dealing with your dynamic team, understanding the stages of the team, it could derail your career. Difficulty handling change or lacking of adaptability. Oh, how many times have you been in a situation where something has changed, right? And so maybe it's something at work, maybe it's something with a coworker, maybe a coworker leaves or something happens and you don't deal with it very well. Is that often? Occasionally? All the time? That can derail our career because what we know, and you guys feel this, I'm sure intuitively at least, is that jobs are changing. Careers are changing. We have this new tool coming into the world called AI. AI is impacting everything we do. Organizations are changing based on AI. And so if we are not capable or not wanting to handle change, that can derail our career. And so being aware of that and looking at that and kind of making sure that how am I dealing with change? Is it something that I like? Is it something that I resist? And why do I resist it? The inability to build or maintain relationships. One of the things, and I don't know a job, maybe you do, but I don't know a job that does not require me to work with somebody else. And so maybe that is on a team, but maybe I have my own job, but I have people that are giving me information and I'm sharing information with them. I'm still having to build and maintain those relationships. It's really important in today's workforce that we're able to deal with and work with people of all kinds of backgrounds. And so kind of being aware of that and looking at that becomes really important. And then lastly, inadequate behavior control. And that is reacting in the moment versus responding. And I got to tell you, this is something that I was challenged with. I was challenged with this most of my career, for sure. But I remember this one time, my boss, and my boss's boss was part of this, has decided that they were going to change something in our organization. And I did not feel that it was going to be beneficial for my team. And so I did what any good corporate soldier did. I scheduled a meeting with my boss. And that meeting turned into a conversation, which turned into a discussion, which turned into a debate, which turned into an argument, which turned into me yelling at my boss. And finally, I got up from my chair. I was so frustrated and so angry. I got up from my chair. I walked out his door. And on my way out, I slammed that door as hard as I could. That slamming reverberated down the wall. Like you could have seen the wall kind of move down the wall. It was so loud that my friends on the other side of the building said, "That was you?" It also reverberated down my career. My career was pushed off, was derailed for about 2 years. Not individual who ended up becoming executive vice president at the company I was working, never worked with me again, would not work with me. Luckily, I didn't get fired, but my career was derailed. And it took me a long time to kind of work through that and see what do I need to do and how do I need to do? What was happening in that moment that caused me to do it? In fact, that was kind of started me on this journey of understanding emotional intelligence and the impact it has. And so one of the things we do at my company is we look at why people are successful in the workplace. And this is what we realize that individuals, right, the best leaders consistently make the right behavioral choice in the moment. But it's in that moment that I want to talk about today, right? Because that's when it matters. It doesn't matter like, oh gosh, 4 hours ago, this is what I should have done, but I didn't do it. It's that ability to make the right decision in the moment that matters. And this really has a lot to do with intentionality and managing that in there. So I want to start with understanding emotions and what is underneath all this. Where do these emotions come from and where do they impact us and how do we think about that on there? I remember my first job. I don't know if you remember your first job, but if you think back to your first job, and I remember I decided that I needed advice, right? Because this is the first time I'm going to work. I don't know what to do. So I call my grandfather, who had worked at DuPont for 30, 35 years at this point. And so I call him up and I'm like, Granddad, can you tell me like what should I know and that kind of stuff? And he gave me some really, really good advice. At the end of the conversation, he said to me, John, leave your emotions at the door. And I'm like, okay, Grandpa, no problem. I'll do that. And I hung up and I'm like, all right. So I get there and I'm thinking, okay, I gotta keep my emotions. I gotta leave them at the door. And so I get to work the next day and I go in and I'm like, okay, so where do I leave my emotions? I wonder if they're going to give me a wooden box to stuff those emotions in, or maybe I'll just leave them in my locker, right? We all know that we don't leave our emotions at the door, right? They come with us in there. And one of the things we look at is think about your work, and that's only part of your life. And so we only get so much energy in the day. And when our energy is low, our emotions become rawer, ready to react, and that kind of stuff. And so when we're going into work, we're bringing our energy level, we're bringing those emotions in with us, and it matters. We need to be thinking about that. I was doing a presentation around emotional intelligence for 150 accounts. And I'm like, hey, you gotta, you bring your emotions into work. I'm telling them that. And they're like, wait a minute, John. We've been told through all of our training, everything that we do, that we can't allow emotions to impact our work. And so I asked them, I said, well, let me ask you some questions. Have you ever been excited when you've been at work? Like maybe you got a new client and everyone's hands went up. And I'm like, have you ever been um, annoyed with one of your coworkers? Everyone's hands goes up. And then I'm like, well, have you ever been frustrated with your boss? And no hands went up. And I'm looking around going, wait a minute. And they're all looking around the room to see if their boss was in the room. And I said, look, all of those experiences have an emotional component. And so you're bringing that emotional component into work, whether you like it or not. And so you need to be aware about it. So tell me in the chat box, go find that chat box and tell me, what are emotions? How do you define emotions? So we're here to talk about emotional intelligence. How do you define emotions? Throw them in the chat box so everyone can see. If you're not sure, do me a favor, just throw a question mark in there so I know you can hear the questions. I think I stumped the audience. Okay. So I wanted to know that question, right? Diana, thank you. Yeah. Feelings and how we relate. Emotions are your behavioral responses. Oh, good, Christine. I like that one. Right. And so I wanted to know the official definition. Oh, that's a good one, Rachel. Yeah. My emotions are spurred by my experiences. And so I wanted to know the official definition, right? I wanted to understand what it was. So I went to the American Psychology Association. I knocked on their door and I'm like, tell me what emotions are. And here's what they told me. Emotions are a complex pattern of changes. So if you didn't know before this webinar, know that emotions are complex, right? They are very complex. And there are a pattern of changes, including physiological arousals. And so one of the things about emotions is we can feel them in our body, right? They impact our physiological, they impact us, right? And we can feel it, and we can dive into that, and we can do that. Our feelings, our cognitive process, our strong emotions impact how we think. And behavior reactions made in response to a situation perceived to be personally significant. So let me read this again. Just make so can we kind of hear it all together? Emotions are a complex pattern of changes, including physiological arousals, feelings, cognitive process, and behavior reactions made in response to a situation perceived to be personally significant. And that last part's really important because we can all be in the same room, right? We could be all dealing with the same event, dealing with the same environment, and have different reactions based on how we perceive it. Let me tell you a story. My wife and I, a couple of weeks ago, we were out shopping at an antique mall. And there's antique malls, and then there's all these different booths, all these different vendor booths. We're walking down, and I see about 3 booths down an antique wooden lighthouse. And immediately I have this a sense of nostalgia. So I grew up in Pennsylvania, but my grandparents had a farm in Maine. And every time we would go visit them, we would go to the lighthouse. And so I would think about going to that lighthouse, and we would have a picnic, and we would climb, we would play in the tidal pools, and if we were lucky, we would get to climb to the top of the lighthouse and look out. We would see seals, and we would see schools of fish, and maybe a whale if we were really lucky. And so I see this lighthouse, and I'm having that happiness. Like I feel happy because I had those experiences. I'm also feeling sad because I can't have that experience again, right? I can't have that experience with my grandparents. They're long gone. My wife, who's walking right next to me, sees the lighthouse about the same time I'm having, and she's having no emotional reaction to it. She didn't grow up going to the coast of Maine, and so she didn't have that emotional reaction. Her only reaction was, John, you're not bringing that into our house, right? And so we just kind of looked at that and we're like, okay, right? And so you have that, right? Personally significant, different responses based on how we perceive that in there. All right, so what emotions are you experiencing right now? Tell me an emotion that you may be experiencing right now. Tell me in the question box or the chat box, I should say. What are the emotion that you're experiencing right now? Now, for me, I feel this mix of excitement and nervousness, right? Because I'm excited because I love this topic, and then I'm nervous because I'm doing a webinar and I want to make sure this is good and I have high expectations of myself. So what emotions may you be experiencing, or what emotions have you experienced already today? Think about today as a whole. What emotions? I do this in my classes, and a lot of people talk about many different emotions. Some people are like, oh, I was frustrated today, or I was a little anxious, or I was excited because my grandson is graduating from high school tonight. Right? And so we can have so many different emotions throughout the day. One of the things I think that we don't think about in the middle of having strong emotions is emotions really don't last very long. And so being aware of that, I love the emotions you all put in there. And just being aware of that and kind of making sure that we're collecting, right? Because again, we need to be aware. When we're talking about that self-awareness, we need to be aware of what those emotions are in there. So, do you guys remember? Gosh, it was about over 6 years ago now. There was this little thing going on. I don't know if you remember it. It was this pandemic. Yeah, I remember it. And so at the time, my business kind of got slow, and I've always been fascinated by the interconnectionness of emotions. And so I started looking at this, and I'm like, how do we perceive emotions? How do we pull them together? And I got this idea of the rainbow, right? So when you think about a rainbow, you see the primary colors, right? You see those primary colors, but if you move closer and really inspect the rainbow, you start seeing all these variations of color, right? The shades and variations of color. And I thought about that for emotions, and I'm like, that's kind of the same thing for emotions as well. And I created what I call the expressions of emotions, right? And so you can see in my rainbow slide there that there are 7 different categories of emotions that I created. The first one is desire, which houses things like being motivated and being hopeful and being passionate, or enjoyment, happy, content, thrilled, joy would fall in there. Now, there's this other emotion that I don't think we talk about enough, but I think it's where a lot of us spend a lot of our time. It's the neutral emotion, right? Where we're reserved, or we're reflective, or we're calm. And I think when I think back throughout my day, a lot of the time spent there. And then there's sadness, right? That's a strong emotion. Fear, feeling apprehensive, anxious, nervous. And you think about anxiety, it's really the fear of the unknown and not knowing how to deal with a particular situation. And then we have anger. And then we have aversion or disgust, sometimes people say, but I like aversion better. And so that's disdain, skeptical. And so I told that story of me getting angry, right? And so slamming the door, not good for your career, just as a reminder. And so I decided that I needed some help. And so I'm getting some anger management help and really kind of looking at what causes it and what does. And I remember one day I was at work and I went down to the vending machine to get, I don't know, snacks or something like that, right? And so I went to the vending machine and I put money in it. And I got the vending wheel of death. Have you guys seen this where it just spins and nothing drops? Right? And I remember being frustrated and angry and irritated. And I went back to my desk, and one of my coworkers, you may have this coworker, that just kind of reads your face. And she was like, "All right, John, what's going on?" And I was about to say, "I'm angry." But I realized I wasn't angry. I was frustrated, a little irritable. But when we name the emotion that we're feeling, it gives us a sort of set and permission, right? And so if I said I was angry, that means I could have expressed it. I could have rocked that machine. I could have knocked it down and, "Yeah, I'm really angry." But I was just irritated, right? And so I went back to my desk. I got another dollar, went back, picked something else, got it out of the vending machine. And so being aware and being able to name those emotions is critical in being more emotionally intelligent, right? And so being aware of that becomes really important. And so, whoops. And so when we look at what emotional intelligence is, social and emotional intelligence is the ability to be aware of our emotions and those in others in the moment, right? We're back into that phrase in the moment, and to use that information to manage ourselves and our relationships. And so when we're thinking about this from the aspect of our career and the aspect of working really hard and getting the things we want, a lot of the times intelligence quotient comes up. And when we think about that, we really put in like, oh, somebody has a high IQ. They must be really smart. But that's not what IQ means. IQ means the capacity to learn, right? It's the capacity to learn. And that really gets formed kind of around the age of 25, 26, 27, is when our intelligent quotient kind of reaches at the level it's going to be for the rest of our lives. And so we're kind of stuck. That's it. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not intelligent. It just means that our capacity to learn may be less than other people's intelligence, right? So logical reason, verbal, math, abstract thinking, it sets that capacity level. Now, you could fill that jar of capacity all the way up to the top and overflowing, or you could use half of it. That's going to be up to you when it comes to intelligence quotients. What I love about emotional intelligence, on the other hand, is something that grows with us as we experience life, as we pay attention to being more emotionally intelligent, being more intentional, we can have a stronger emotional intelligence. And so that's where I think the power of emotional intelligence is. Some of the most emotionally intelligent people, I should say, are people that have life experience, right? That have had these life experience. They can see things in different ways and look at things. I always think about my mom. We used to always have Thanksgiving at her house. And we would always have all the family members and all that, but we would also have cousins coming over and people coming over. And what was fascinating was that every Thanksgiving, every one of my cousins would always, I want to say corner my mom, but have a conversation with my mom about their life, right? What was going on in their life? Because they knew she was very emotionally intelligent, very emotionally aware of what's happening. We all have that person. Like they're just aware, and they're the person we go to kind of figure those things out to do that. Jack Welch, I don't know if you know who Jack Welch was, but he used to be the CEO of General Electric, and he was considered one of the leadership gurus, right? And he was all about numbers and that kind of stuff. But he said, no doubt, emotional intelligence is more rare than book smarts, but his experience says it is actually more important in the making of the leader. And so if we want to have a great career, being emotionally intelligent is such a critical thing. We really want to make sure that we're getting that in there. And so when we look at emotional intelligence, a lot of people break it down into the four different quadrants. And the first quadrant is that self-awareness, right? Do we have self-awareness? Now, the way I look at this, I kind of expand this a little bit because I think we need to be self-aware of our strengths. What do we do really well? And what don't we do really well? And how do we use our strengths to overcome our weaknesses, right? And we need to know that. But also on the emotional side, we need to be aware of the emotions that we're experiencing in the moment, right? And so being aware and being able to assess that is really critical. And that gives us that personal power, right? Kind of doing that on there. And then once we know that, are we managing that in a way that is beneficial for our career? I always say this, every behavior choice we make is going to do one of two things. It's either going to get us closer to where we want to be or farther away. It's our choice. We get to make it. And so that's that self-management, making those decisions in the moment. And then we have social awareness, right? Being aware of what other people are feeling, and then managing and building our relationships based on our understanding of what those emotions are. And so let's talk a little bit about the self side of emotional intelligence. And so I love this quote from Amy Bashir. It says, behavior change is hard. Oh, it's so true, right? Behavior change is hard, whether we're trying to do it for ourselves or we're trying to create a system to do that. There's a human behavior model that says this. Our outcomes, right? Where we are in life, where you are right now in life, is a direct correlation of all the behavior choices you made. And so all the behavior choices you have made have led you to this webinar. But the beauty of it is you get to decide where all the behavior choices you're going to make going forward, where they're going to take you. And they can take you to wonderful places if you're being intentional about the decisions you're making. But it's not that simple, right? It's not, oh, I'm just going to make this behavioral change and it'll be fine. It's hard because there's another side to this model. And it really starts with the triggering event or the environment or the situation that we find ourselves in. That happens, right? That triggering event happens, and then we assign meaning to it based on our perspective, based on our interpretation of our event, what I call our advantage point. We see the world through the advantage point. And something that it took me a long time to understand is we don't react to the triggering event. We react to our assigned meaning of that event, right? So our advantage, our perspective kind of gets in there and makes that choice. And then we have this strong emotion based on that assigned meaning, which then causes us to have a behavioral change. And so the human behavior model says, look, behavior changes are important. That intentionality is important. But we also have to understand that we have emotions and assigned meaning and understanding that we have control of those behavior choices through that. And so when I was in corporate America, I got promoted into this high level role within my organization. And so one of the things my mentors really pushed to me is like, what do you want to be known for? What's going to be your legacy after this role? And there was a lot of different things that I was thinking about and looking at and that kind of stuff. And really the one that I thought was kind of be big was productive meetings. Like I wanted to have productive meetings. Logically, I knew what that meant, right? I knew that I needed an agenda. I needed the right people in the room. I needed to make sure we had action steps out of the meetings. I knew that logically, but I had a pet peeve. People being late to my meeting. They would trigger in me poor behavior choices, right? When people were late, I would be making snide comments like, well, it's about time you showed up, right? And I didn't really think anything of it. I still thought I was having productive meetings. One day, I'm walking back to my office after one of my meetings with a coworker, and the coworker goes, John, do I need to attend your meetings? And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you? They're the best meetings in the company. She goes, yeah, but I feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, well, who's making you feel uncomfortable? And so she turns to me, right? We need this friend. You need this friend at work, turns to me and says, it was you, or it's you. And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, well, every time somebody's late, you get angry and annoyed. So I'm expressing these really bad emotions. I'm feeling that. And so I go back to my office and I think about it and I'm like, she's right. And so I'm like, okay, so what are the right behaviors or choices to make when somebody's late? And so I start working really hard to be more welcoming and more warm and greeting people even though they're late. But here's the thing. I'm doing that, but I don't feel comfortable. I feel like I put my dad's suits on and it's not the right fit. And so I started thinking about like, what am I thinking? What assigned meaning have I given to that person that's being late? And I realized it was disrespect. I felt that they were disrespecting me for being late and they were doing it on purpose. They were making that choice to disrespect me. But what happened was, as I started talking to people after my meetings, they would start apologizing that they were late. And I started hearing their stories, right? And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry I'm late. My child was sick and I just had, right? And so I started hearing it from their point of view, and that assigned meaning started changing, right? It started becoming one of kindness, like, oh, yeah, we all have things going on in life. That's why they're late. It has nothing to do with me. And so we got to be aware of that, right? That's that self-management, that self-awareness that becomes important. So there's a couple things that we can do around self-awareness. Practice emotional labeling, right? And so being aware, what emotion am I feeling in that moment? Asking for honest feedback, talking to other people and going, all right, am I reacting in the wrong way? Am I right? And so getting other people's perspective, right? Because you see yourself from the inside. How do other people see you from the outside? Journal for pattern recognition. I do this with my executive coaching clients. They don't like it. They don't want to do it. But boy, we find a lot of really good information and data when they start seeing like, why are they experiencing certain emotions at certain times? And so being aware of that, right? That's that self-awareness part. Slow down for mindful pausing, right? That in between that reaction, in between the triggering event and your response, there's that pause, and kind of finding that in there can be really good. And then just kind of reflect on your values and what triggers you. What we find is strong values. I have one around fairness. I believe that everyone should be treated equally, blah, blah, blah. And when somebody breaks that down or does something different, that triggers something in me, right? And so kind of looking at those things in there. Travis Bradbury, who wrote the Emotional Intelligence 2.0, highly recommend it. It's a great book. Said people with a high degree of emotional intelligence make an average of $29,000 more per year than people with a low degree of emotional intelligence. Now, I am not telling you after this class that you're going to be making $29,000 more. I wish I had that power. I would give it to you. I don't. But we do know that people have emotional intelligence, have stronger careers, and therefore are typically more respected and therefore make more money, right? And so kind of looking at that. The other side of this is that self-management, right? And so understanding that it's our choice how we're going to react. And so building that pause reflex, right? And so making that reflex between, okay, triggering event, I'm feeling this strong emotion. Let me pause, recognize that emotion. What's the right behavior in that moment, right? And so kind of putting that in there. Understanding what you want. I think a lot of people don't spend enough time writing their own personal vision statement, writing out what they want to do, thinking about their career, because that's what's going to guide you. That's going to give you the places, that's going to give you the onus to do that. Practice emotional substitution, create a reset ritual like, okay, I'm all flustered or I'm all anxious. Just being aware. Maybe that's breathing, maybe that's mindfulness, maybe that's just going for a walk, but thinking about how you're going to reset that becomes important. And then the other thing that you can do is identify and monitor your triggers and being aware what are the things that trigger your strong emotions. Because that really is where we can get that practice in and kind of build it. So Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning said this, between stimulus and response, so between triggering event and our personal response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies growth and our freedom. And I take that wholeheartedly. I am a big believer in intentionality and making those intentional decisions. The challenge is for a lot of us, we've developed habits, some good, some bad. Those are not intentional choices. We built them in because our brain loves shortcuts and it wants efficiency and effectiveness. Those shortcuts may not be the right choice in the moment, right? So being aware and kind of making that intentionality isn't good. So how do we build strong relationships with others, right? How do we do that? How do we make that happen? We get into this bottom quadrant, right? We talk about that social awareness and being more aware of what emotions other people are struggling with or dealing with in the moment, and then using them to build our relationships, right? Using that to do that. And so how do we get better social awareness? I really think is walking into any situation and taking a moment to kind of look around and go, what's the emotional current in the room? I've seen people come in, especially leaders, come into a room, come into a meeting, and they get right into it, and they're not picking on the vibe of the room. And so taking that time, when you're meeting with somebody one-on-one, ask yourself, I wonder what they're feeling right now, right? Maybe it's a direct report coming to talk to you about something. Do they look nervous? Do they look excited? Do they look joyful? Are they worried about something? Right? Pick up on that. It's a really important aspect to do it. Check your assumptions, right? Do not assume because you would behave a certain way, other people would have behaved the same way, right? And so one of the things when we talk about emotional intelligence 3.0 is that everyone expresses their emotions differently. And so the best thing you can do, if you're not sure what emotion someone's experiencing, just ask. I noticed that you seem a little nervous today. Am I reading that right? Gosh, you were really excited when that thing happened. Is that true? Right? And so get them to talk about it, right? And so we kind of do that. The old nonverbal cues. I was doing a class this morning, and we were talking about body language. Pay attention to body language. You're going to learn so much about people and how they're feeling. Are they leaned in? Are their arms crossed? Are they kicked back? Right? Understand what they're doing. Right? And so kind of look for that. Pay attention to it. Just to recognize, hey, these are there. Ask thoughtful and open-ended questions. I love a good question. Questions really steer conversations. You have a power to go take any conversation any way you want by asking those powerful questions and kind of really thinking through that in there. And then we all know, practice active listening, pay attention, watch the verbal cues, kind of doing all of those things can be really powerful. I think when I think about active listening, it's about being aware of what's happening in the moment versus being aware of what's happening in my head. I, like many people, are a future thinker. So when we start talking, I'm trying to solve your problem and I'm thinking about your problem. And so I'm only really listening to the first three sentences you say, and then I'm trying to solve your problem. And everything else may be really, really important. But in my head, I forgot to listen to it. And so one of the things that I've really worked on is being in that moment, being present with that person, and allowing them to express themselves fully before I jump in and offer my opinion or do that, right? And so again, there's things we can do. Minimal encouragements, listen for emotions, not just facts. Reflect what they've said back to us, paraphrase, don't parrot, but paraphrase, kind of doing that can be really powerful because you become a good conversational partner. You're going to learn more about that other person. You're going to get a lot more information in there. And so, how do we manage better relationships, right? And so, relationship management is the ability to use our awareness of our own emotions and the emotions of others to make those interactions beneficial for both of us, right? And so when we want to have better relationships, it's not for just for our point of view, it's for their point of view. How do we build that up and do that? So understanding shared goals. If you're working in an organization or on a team, does everyone know exactly what their goals and teams are? I'm doing tomorrow for a local county, I'm doing a strategic conversations and we're going to clarify shared goals so everyone's on the same page. And it's a really powerful exercise because we can then see, are we putting the energy towards that, right? And so kind of looking at that. Respond, don't react. And this is the hard part. That's finding that pause and thinking about, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do that? Use conflict as a tool for growth. I don't think all conflict is bad. Conflict is just two people having different expectations or perceptions of the same situation. And so when you're in conflict with somebody, doesn't mean you're right and they're wrong. It means that you have different lens of how you're looking at the situation. And so have a conversation like, okay, well, you disagree with me. Why? Tell me, give me an right, because then you're going to build that relationship. Maybe you don't agree. I'm not saying you're going to agree with the person, but you understand where they're coming from can be a powerful tool to do that. Communicate with intention, right? Going back to the word intentionality, communicate in a way so that they can hear you, not that you can be heard, right? You want them to be able to hear you and their style and their communication style. All of those things are really powerful to do. And then lead with empathy. I think empathy is one of those things that really drives connection. So 2021, a Catalyst study found that 76% of people with highly empathetic leaders reported that they were more engaged at work, and 61% said they were more innovative. Seems like a good reason to be there. And empathy is really coming into its own in the last 10 years because we know being empathetic allows us to connect with other people and allows them to have psychological safety in the workplace. And so that becomes a really important thing on doing that. And so it's about being curious. One of the things when I talk about performance management is not like you're not doing this right. It's the conditions that you're in, that decision made perfectly rationale. Maybe we don't have the right conditions. And that's about being curious and thinking and asking those questions on there. Listening without fixing. Ooh, that's a hard one. Right? Because we want to fix, we want to help people, we want to solve it. That's not what empathy is about. Empathy is about listening and understanding that other person's point of view. Step into their shoes, shift your own perspective. We used to do a program called Walk a Mile, from the old Southern proverb, walk a mile. You don't know a person's trouble until you walk a mile in their shoes. And so we would send people to different departments in our organization so they could understand the challenges they had, what worked really well there, what didn't work really well, how we could support them. It was amazing the empathy that would come out of that. Read, watch, and listen to diverse stories, right? And so it's kind of paying attention to people. Everyone has their own story. And so maybe read a different book. Maybe that's not a story that you would read. Or I love reading works from outside the United States because getting their perspective is so different than the United States. It's like, oh, that's what, oh, kind of opens that up. And reflect on your own emotions first, right? Kind of paying attention to that becomes important. Empathy does not mean agreement. It means understanding. I think that's a good point. And so, one of the things we know, one of the emotional intelligence drivers is trust. And so when we're thinking about trust, it's underlying all relationships. If you don't have trust, you don't have psychological safety, and that means that you're always working on an anxiety level. And so building that trust up with your teammates, your coworkers, your peers, your direct reports is incredibly important to make sure that we're getting that the right way. And so when we think about trust, there's a couple questions you should ask yourself. Are you trustworthy? Means do your actions match your words? So are you doing what you said you were going to do? Am I considering the other person's perspective is in needs? And that's really interesting, right? Because that is really empathetic, but it's also about trust. If roles were reversed, would I trust myself in this moment, right? So that's kind of that deeper looking at, would I trust another person? We had a big conversation today whether about trust was earned or given, and that's different. Every person is different with it. At this particular group, it was a lot of earned, but there was a few people who are like, no, I give it, and then if they mess up, then I take it away, right? Am I making the other person feel safe, right? Is that psychological safety? And as a leader, you may want to be thinking about that. So there's this trust equation that says credibility plus reliability plus intimacy means trust, right? And so those are the things that build trust up. Are we credible? Do we have the expertise that we say we do? Are we reliable? Do we show up when we say we're going to show up? And are we connected to that person? Do people feel confident and sharing details of their lives with us? And one of the biggest trust destroyers is self-orientation, right? If it's all about me, that's going to destroy trust. And so kind of looking at those things in there. So there's 6 things we can do to build trust. And I really think about this when I think about trust is that when I ask people what makes someone trustworthy, the answers all center around they show up. They show up, they do what they're saying they're going to do. But what I find is, especially in the workplace, with coworkers, with direct reports and leaders, we all have unstated expectations. And so when someone breaks my unstated expectations, I don't trust them. And they're looking at me, I don't understand why you don't trust me. Because I haven't told them what my unstated expectation was. And this is really important for leaders because I want leaders to ask their team, what does it mean? How do I build trust with you? What does it mean for you, for me to be the best leader for you? And it's going to be different for all of your employees. But if you don't know that, you may break their trust without even knowing. And so a couple things that you can do to make sure that happens, right? Be consistent with your actions and your behaviors and the way you talk to people. Be as honest and transparent as possible in your role. I love that being vulnerable is on this list now. For you to say, I am not perfect, allows people to feel psychological safety. Psychological safety builds trust. And so having that ability to like, look, I'm not perfect. I'm not expecting you to be perfect. Really drives a long way. Obviously, be respectful, be present with them, and then be curious. Asking them questions and trying to understand those become a really important thing. So employees who strongly trust their leaders are 7 times more likely to be engaged. That comes from the Gallup organization. I think it says it all, right? So being trustworthy in there, on there. So we're running out of time, but social and emotional intelligence is the ability to be aware of our own emotions and those of others, again, in that moment. We're making behavioral choices in the moment and to use that information to manage ourselves and our relationships. When we can do that really well, we have very strong impact on our own careers. And so kind of paying attention to that and looking at that can be really a powerful thing to do. before I ask for questions, I want to give you this quote because this is one of my favorite quotes, and I think it's really important. When we're thinking about what's going on in today's world, I love this quote for this. And every day, the world will drag you by the hand, yelling, "This is important, this is important, you need to worry about this and this and this." Here's what I want you to do. Each day, it's up to you to yank your hand back, put it on your heart, and say, "No, this is what's important." That's when you become truly emotionally intelligent. Thank you so much for listening. Please let me know if you have any questions. Christine, if there's any questions that popped up into the chat box, let me know.
Sure. Thank you so much, John. You gave us so many tips. What a great webinar. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today and spending your time with us. At Laurel Ridge Workforce Solutions Corporate Training, we know that no two workplaces are exactly alike. That's why we specialize in customized training solutions. So if today's topic sparked an idea or highlighted opportunities that you think your organization would benefit from having a training on this, our team can work with you to adapt this content specifically for your team. We'll be sharing the webinar recording today via email, and you can reach out to us by responding to that email. We'll also put our contact information in the chat in just a moment, and we'll hang out. If you've have questions, we'd love for you to type it in the chat, or we can unmute and you can ask out loud. With that, if you don't have any questions, thank you so much and have a wonderful day.